The UAP Harold Case File 017. High Alert. It is the afternoon of the 2nd of July, 2008. The place is Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe, a country that at this exact moment is coming apart at the seams. And somewhere over the city's main airport, something is hanging in the sky that should not be there. It is not moving. It is just sitting there at an altitude no one on the ground can quite pin down, directly above the runways where the airliners come and go. Disc-like, they will say later, a hollow center, and underneath it, a ring of lights, turning slowly around the rim of the thing. People stop, people look up, and as they watch, the lights begin to change color, and then beams of light coming down out of the object, and then without a sound, it climbs, straight up, fast, until it is gone, out of sight, out of range, out of the sky it had owned for the last few minutes. Now, that is a story. On its own, it is a good campfire story, and nothing more. Skies are full of stories, but here is why we are telling you this one. Because within 24 hours of that object leaving the sky over Harare, a message was written, a classified cable, and that cable was not filed away in some dusty African field office to be forgotten. It was addressed, by name, to the White House Situation Room, to the Director of National Intelligence, to the Defense Intelligence Agency, to the National Security Agency at Fort Meade, to the FBI, to the Secret Service, to the National Counterterrorism Center, to Strategic Command, and Special Operations Command, and half the combatant commands the United States has. A disc over an airport in Zimbabwe put the government of the United States on notice. Tonight, a real declassified CIA cable, 3 pages, released to the public for the first time in June of 2026, that says, in its own careful, half-redacted language, that this incident resulted in a decision to place a Zimbabwean entity on high alert. We are going to read it to you line by line. We are going to show you exactly who received it, and we are going to be honest with you about the single biggest problem with the whole thing, which is that, to this day, no one outside that cable has ever confirmed that anything was over that airport at all. This is a Harold file. We follow the paper. Let's follow it. Start with what the document actually is, because the container matters as much as the contents. What we are looking at is not a report of a flying saucer. It is a piece of intelligence tradecraft. Across the top of every one of its 3 pages runs a single word, printed and then struck through with a heavy line.
Secret, NOFORN.
Secret / NOFORN. That marking means the contents are classified at the secret level and not releasable to foreign nationals, not even to allied governments. This was never meant for you. The cable carries a message number, 455482, and a timestamp, 031710 Zulu. It originates, and I am reading the header, from
CIA, Washington, D.C.
And it labels itself in plain block capitals with a phrase that is the whole key to reading it responsibly. It calls itself
Information Report, not finally evaluated intelligence.
Sit with that phrase. Not finally evaluated intelligence. In the agency's own vocabulary, that is a raw reporting stamp. It means this is something we received from a source, and we are passing it up the chain. But we have not yet judged whether it is true. It is the intelligence equivalent of a witness statement, not a verdict. The agency is not telling the White House a saucer was over Harare. It is telling the White House, here is what came in. And then underneath comes the boilerplate that tells you how seriously the machine took its own paper.
Warning. Sensitive intelligence sources and methods involved. Any transmission or revelation of this information in any manner to an unauthorized person is prohibited. Violators may be subject to criminal prosecution, including under the espionage laws of the United States.
The espionage laws of the United States, over a disk with a hollow center. Whatever a source told the CIA about the sky over Harare that afternoon, the agency wrapped it in the same legal armor it wraps around the identity of a spy. That is not proof the object was real, but it is proof of how the report was handled. Somebody, somewhere, decided this piece of paper needed protecting. There is one more detail on the container, and it is a small forensic gift. Printed in the top corner of every page is a web address from an internal CIA system called Trident and a print date stamped by a printer of June 15, 2009, which tells us this cable was written in July of 2008 and was still being pulled up and printed inside the agency a year later. Someone was still reading the Harare file in 2009. We do not know why. The cable does not say, but the paper trail is real, and it is datable, and that is where a Harald file always begins. Now the contents, and I want to do this the way the cable does it, carefully, because half of it is missing. The substance of the report lives in 2 numbered paragraphs on the second page. The first sentence begins in the middle of a redaction, a black box where the source should be, and then resumes. Here is the text, verbatim, reading only what is actually on the page.
Was reporting from Zimbabwe regarding an unidentified object hovering at high altitude over the Harare International Airport. This object was observed, possibly by both radar and optical means, in the skies above Harare during the afternoon of 2 July 2008.
Possibly by both radar and optical means. Notice the hedge, possibly. Even here, in the secret channel, the reporting will not swear the object was on radar. It says maybe. The cable goes on.
Reporting indicated that the object hovered at an undetermined altitude directly over the Harare Airport. At one point during observation, quote, beams, end quote, were observed emanating from the object.
Beams, and the cable itself puts the word in quotation marks as if to hold it at arm's length. Someone reported beams. The agency is repeating the word, not endorsing it. Then paragraph 3. And this is the paragraph that makes the whole file remarkable, because the government does something governments almost never do on paper. It admits it does not know what the thing was, and it lays out both possibilities in the same breath.
Individuals who were aware of the incident had debated whether the object was an advanced reconnaissance device belonging to a foreign government, or whether the object was an unidentified flying object of extraterrestrial origins.
Read that again slowly, because it is doing something careful. The cable is not claiming the object came from another world. It is reporting a debate. On one side, a foreign spy platform, a drone, a reconnaissance device belonging to some other government. On the other side, extraterrestrial. Those were the 2 poles people reached for. And the document, to its credit, refuses to pick one. Then it gives the physical description. And this is the part every headline quoted. According to the observers, the object was
disc-like in shape, with a hollow center, and had a series of rotating lights on the underside of the airframe. After a period under observation from the ground, the rotating lights under the object shifted colors, and the object quickly ascended to higher altitudes and out of visual range.
Disc, hollow center, rotating lights that changed color, a climb, and gone. And then the sentence that is the reason this is a national security document and not a diary entry.
Regardless of the origins, this incident had resulted in the decision to place the Zimbabwe on high alert.
Regardless of the origins, that is the hinge of the entire cable. It is saying, It does not matter, for our purposes, whether that was a spy drone or a spaceship. What matters is that somebody with authority looked at it and raised an alert. The object changed a posture on the ground, and that is a fact about human beings and their fear, which is a fact you can act on even when the object itself stays a mystery. Let's talk about the part of this cable that almost nobody read, because it is not the sighting, it is the address line. And the address line in an intelligence cable is a confession. It tells you exactly how far up the chain someone decided this thing needed to go. So let me read you the guest list. Who received a copy of a cable about a disc over an airport in Zimbabwe? At the very top, the first name on the distribution, before anyone else,
The White House Situation Room, Washington, D.C.
the Situation Room. The room in the basement of the West Wing, where the president is briefed on the things that cannot wait. That is recipient number 1. Then, in order, off the same page,
The Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of State, Bureau of Intelligence and Research, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Joint Staff, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the Director of the National Security Agency, Fort George G. Meade.
That is the entire top of the American intelligence and military command structure. And it keeps going into the agencies you do not think of as looking at the sky at all.
The Department of the Treasury, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the United States Secret Service, the National Counterterrorism Center, the Federal Aviation Administration, National Headquarters, the Department of Transportation, the Homeland Security Center, Transportation Security Administration Headquarters, the Department of Commerce.
The Treasury, the Secret Service, counterterrorism, the TSA. Ask yourself why a disc over Harare gets routed to the people who guard the president and the people who screen your shoes at the airport. And then the cable reaches across the ocean to the combatant commands, the warfighters.
European Command in Vihingen, Germany, the Joint Analysis Center at RAF Molesworth in the United Kingdom, U.S. Army Europe in Heidelberg, Ramstein Air Base, the 6th Fleet, the 2nd Fleet, Strategic Command, Offutt Air Force Base, Transportation Command, Scott Air Force Base, Special Operations Command, MacDill, Joint Special Operations Command, Fort Bragg, and Africa Command in Stuttgart, Germany.
Joint Special Operations Command, Strategic Command, the people who hold the nuclear keys. This is not how you route a curiosity. This is how you route a threat. Now, I have to be fair, and being fair is the whole job here. A broad distribution list is not by itself proof the government believed a spaceship was over Harare. Intelligence cables often go to long-standing lists. Every command with a stake in a region gets a copy by default. It is possible this list is more bureaucracy than alarm. But look at who is on it, and look at what the subject line says the incident was about, and I will read you that subject line next. And you tell me whether this reads like routine paperwork, or like a building full of people deciding all at once to pay attention. So let's read that subject line, because it is where the redactions start, and the redactions are half of this story. The subject of the cable, the one-line summary of what it is about, reads on the page,
Subject, placement, on high alert due to perceived aggressive foreign posturing.
and right there, in the middle of the subject line, between the word placement and the words on high alert, is a black box, a redaction. The single most important noun in the sentence, the name of whatever was placed on high alert, is withheld. We are told there was a placement on high alert. We are not allowed to know what was placed on it. That is the pattern for the whole document. Let me describe the physical page to you, because you would be struck by it if you saw it. Roughly half of this cable is black. The first paragraph of the actual text, paragraph 1, is a solid redaction box. Gone. Entirely. The second numbered item, dated early July 2008, begins and then vanishes into another box. The identity of the source, reporting from Zimbabwe, redacted. The clause after the beams, redacted. The identity of the individuals who debated the object's origin, redacted. The identity of the observers who described the disk, redacted. And the name of the Zimbabwean entity that went on high alert, redacted.
What survives is a skeleton. The verbs survive, observed, hovered, debated, resulted, placed. The nouns that would tell you who and which body and on whose authority, those are the parts the government still will not say 18 years later.
And here is the honest reading of that, the one we owe you. Those black boxes are not evidence of a cover-up of a spaceship. That is the tempting leap, and it is the wrong one. Under United States classification rules, the CIA redacts to protect one thing above all others: sources and methods. Who told us? How we know? The most likely thing behind those boxes is not a saucer, it is a person. A human source in Zimbabwe whose identity, if revealed, could get them killed. So the redactions cut both ways. They are why we cannot verify the core of this story. We cannot call the source because we are not allowed to know who the source is. And they are also the most normal, explainable thing in the entire file. The mystery in the black boxes is probably a name and a job title, not a species. We say that plainly, but we also note, just as plainly, it means the load-bearing claim of this cable, that an object was over that airport, rests entirely on a person we are forbidden to identify. Now we have to talk about when, because the date on this cable is not a random Tuesday. The 2nd of July 2008 is one of the darkest weeks in the modern history of Zimbabwe. And if you do not know what was happening on the ground, you cannot read this document honestly. Let me be careful here, and I want you to hold me to it. Nothing I am about to say is in the cable. The cable does not mention an election. It does not mention politics. What I am giving you now is context, the world that this piece of paper was written into, clearly labeled as context, not as a claim from the document.
In the spring and summer of 2008, Zimbabwe was gripped by a catastrophic political crisis. A disputed presidential contest between the longtime ruler, Robert Mugabe, and the opposition leader, Morgan Tsvangirai. A campaign of state violence so severe that Tsvangirai withdrew from the runoff days before it was held. That runoff took place on the 27th of June, 2008, and it was condemned internationally as neither free nor fair.
The 27th of June. And the object over the airport, the sighting in this cable, is the 2nd of July. 5 days later. 5 days after a stolen election in a country under international sanctions, where the government was convinced, not without reason, that foreign powers wanted it gone. Now read that subject line one more time, with that in your ears.
Placement on high alert due to perceived aggressive foreign posturing.
Perceived aggressive foreign posturing. Suddenly that phrase has a different flavor, does it not? To a regime that believed the West was circling, a strange object hovering over the capital's airport would not read as a wonder. It would read as a probe, a drone, a foreign eye in the sky sent to watch a cornered government, which is exactly the first explanation. The cable records those individuals debating, an advanced reconnaissance device belonging to a foreign government. I want to be clear about what this context does and does not do. It does not tell you what the object was. It does not prove it was a drone any more than it proves it was a spaceship. But it does something important. It explains the alert. It tells you why a sighting over an airport in that country in that week would travel with the urgency it did, and why the word posturing, a word about geopolitics, ended up in the subject line of a document about a light in the sky. Fear has a context. This was its context, which brings us to the Skeptic's Corner, the part of every Harold file where we try, as hard as we can, to make the mystery disappear. Because if a disk with rotating lights can be explained by something ordinary, then honesty demands we reach for the ordinary first. Here is the case for the mundane.
Start with the obvious. This is a single, second-hand, unevaluated report. The agency stamps it so itself. There is no photograph in the file, no radar tape, no named witness. The one physical claim about sensors, that it was seen, quote, possibly by both radar and optical means, is hedged with the word possibly. Strip away the classification stamps at the long address line, and what you have left is one anonymous person's account, relayed up a chain of lights in the sky over a city. And lights in the sky over a city have a long list of ordinary authors. A disk with rotating, color-shifting lights that hovers and then climbs is a near-perfect description of a drifting cluster of lights, or a lit aircraft seen at an odd angle, or, and this is the one nobody wants, a lantern or balloon catching the light. The, quote, hollow center is what you see when you look up at the underside of a ring of lights. The beams could be searchlights or reflections, or the mind filling in a shape. None of that is exotic. All of it is Tuesday.
And the skeptic's strongest card is the one we already dealt ourselves, back in the black boxes. We cannot check this. We cannot find the source. We cannot interview the observers, because the observers are a redaction. In any other investigation, a claim you physically cannot verify is a claim you set aside. The burden is on the object, and the object has not met it. But the skeptic has to be honest too. And there is one mundane explanation on this list that is not comforting at all. The best ordinary answer to what hung over Harare that afternoon is the government's own first guess.
An advanced reconnaissance device belonging to a foreign government, a drone. In 2008, high-altitude surveillance drones were real, they were flying, and a nation under sanctions and international pressure was exactly the kind of place a foreign intelligence service might want a persistent eye. A disk with a hollow center and lights on the underside is not a bad description of an unfamiliar aircraft seen from directly below, at an altitude the ground observers could not determine.
Think about what that means. The least paranormal explanation for this file is that a foreign power flew a spy platform over the capital of a collapsing state during its worst political week, and that a regime watching it hover went to high alert, believing it was being probed. That is not a story about aliens. It is a story about the 2nd of July, 2008, being a genuinely dangerous day to be Zimbabwe, and it fits every word of the cable, including the ones about posturing. So where does that leave us? With a document that describes something exotic, framed by a government that took it seriously, sitting on top of a mystery we cannot open, next to a mundane explanation that is chilling in a completely different way. The cable does not resolve it. We are not going to pretend to. There is a last question, and it is maybe the most important one. Why are we able to read this at all? A cable stamped secret, NOFORN, wrapped in the espionage laws. How is it now a file you can pull up on a government website? The answer is recent, and it is real, and it deserves to be said accurately.
In the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024, Congress passed Sections 1841 through 1843, a law that ordered federal agencies to identify and transfer their records on unidentified anomalous phenomena to the National Archives. The archives created a new collection for them, Record Group 615. That statutory basis is real, and this cable's release stamp cites it by name. Approved for release under Section 1842 of the fiscal year 2024 NDAA.
And then it accelerated. In March of 2026, an executive order created a program with a name only a government could love: the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, PURSUE. Under it, the Department of War began publishing tranches of declassified files at a public web address. The first drop came in May of 2026, the second weeks later, and on the 12th of June 2026, the third tranche went out. Dozens of documents from the CIA, the FBI, NASA, and the Defense Department. The Harare cable was in that third tranche. That is when the world first saw it. Within days, the story traveled from Zimbabwean outlets to regional African press to American networks, and that is a point we insist on. This is not a case we dug out of a shoebox. It is a document the United States government itself chose to release under a law and an order it wrote, and then handed to the public with half of it still blacked out. The release is as much a part of the story as the citing. The government is showing you the file and still deciding, line by line, what you are allowed to know. Let's put it in order. The record, as the paper and the public sources actually support it, and nothing more.
The 27th of June, 2008, Zimbabwe holds a widely condemned presidential runoff. Context for the week, not a claim in the cable. The 2nd of July, 2008, afternoon, an unidentified object is reported hovering over Harare International Airport. Disc-like, hollow center, rotating lights that shift color, beams, then a rapid climb out of sight. The 3rd of July, 2008. The CIA cable, message 455482, is distributed 1 day later to the White House Situation Room and dozens of agencies and commands, reporting that the incident resulted in a decision to place a Zimbabwean entity on high alert. The 15th of June, 2009. The cable is printed again from an internal CIA system. Someone is still reading the Harare file a year on. March 2026. An executive order creates the PURSUE disclosure program. The 12th of June, 2026. The cable is released to the public in the third PURSUE tranche, and the story reaches the international press for the first time.
That is the spine. Everything else, what the object was, who the source was, which entity went on alert, is either redacted or unconfirmed or both. We do not get to fill those in. We only get to mark them. So let's do the thing this channel exists to do. Let's separate what we know from what we do not, cleanly, with no thumb on the scale. What we know. We know the document is real, a genuine 3-page CIA cable released by the United States government in June of 2026 under a real disclosure law. We know its own words that an object was reported over Harare Airport on the 2nd of July 2008, that observers described it as a disk with a hollow center and rotating, color-changing lights and beams, that people who knew of it debated whether it was a foreign spy device or something extraterrestrial, and that, quote, regardless of the origins, the incident resulted in a decision to place a Zimbabwean entity on high alert. We know it was addressed to the top of the American government, from the Situation Room down. We know the release itself is confirmed by multiple independent news organizations. All of that is solid ground. Now what we do not know, and this list is longer, and we will not shorten it to make you comfortable. We do not know what the object was. We do not know who the source was. That is a black box. We do not know which Zimbabwean body went on high alert, Black box. We do not know whether the object was ever actually on radar. The cable itself only says possibly. And here is the big one, the one that outranks all the others. No one, anywhere outside of this cable, has independently confirmed that anything was over that airport at all. No photograph has surfaced, no radar track, no named witness. Every account you have read traces back to the same redacted document. The story is real. The paper is real. The object is a single, unverifiable, second-hand report, and unresolved is not the same word as confirmed. So what do we do with the Harare cable? We do not tell you a spaceship hovered over an African airport. The document does not say that, and neither will we. We do not tell you it was a drone either, though that is the explanation that fits the most words on the page. What we tell you is the true thing, the strange thing, the thing that is actually on the paper, that on the 2nd of July, 2008, someone reported an object over Harare International Airport. And that report was taken seriously enough by serious people that it climbed all the way to the White House Situation Room, and it ended with the words, "High alert." The mystery here is not really the disk. The mystery is the reaction. It is a government's fear, written down and stamped secret and mailed to everyone who matters. Over a light in the sky it could not identify. In a week it could not afford surprises. Whatever hung over that runway, real or mistaken, it did something measurable. It moved men to raise an alert and reach for the espionage laws. That is the receipt. That is what survived the black boxes. Everything else, the origins, the source, the truth of the sky that afternoon, remains exactly where the government left it. Withheld, unverified, unresolved. Case file 017. The disk over Harare. Filed. This episode was investigated and produced by an autonomous multi-agent AI system. The real declassified cable read page by page, every load-bearing claim, cross-checked against independent sources, every black box and every hedge flagged out loud, and nothing stated as fact that the record could not carry. If you want the receipts, the case file and the source link are in the pinned comment. The UAP Harold, declassified, investigated, filed.